Well, hello folks, welcome along to this Tennis Elbow Manager 2 video. I am the Custard Prophet. Now you're thinking, what the hell, what's going on? Why are we watching Sean Death playing in Wimbledon? He's just been playing in the US Open and the dates are all wrong. What are you doing? Well, actually this is a really old save. I'm just going to use this as a way to kind of explain a few things. So the video that we're going to be putting out today, or putting together today, is one that I've been asked to do on a good few occasions, and it all relates to the tactical approach that you use within the game. We're going to use this match against the Shapovalov of Canada to just kind of make some points about the way that you want to maybe think about setting up your tactical approach. So we'll move forward to the match. Before we get to the match, what I wanted to point out was something which is, I think, really important. And before you get into the match, there's a few really important things before you get into the match, but one of them, which appears on this screen, in the training screen, that you won't see in that kind of pre-match screen, is your experience points. Now, your experience points have a dual function. And I mentioned that in the training video, that they are used to train your mental attributes, which is a really important thing to focus on. Here you can see that Shawnee has quite low self-confidence at the minute, so it would actually be really useful to try and boost his self-confidence using some of these experience points. But the second role for those experience points is actually within the game. So you can use the experience points within the game to either, for a short term or for the entire match, give yourself a performance boost. And that can be really useful just to give yourself a little bit of a leg up when things aren't necessarily going well. So remember those experience points. They are really, really important. When we're thinking about the tactical approach that we might use, it's going to matter whether how you decide to actually watch the game. I know this seems a bit silly, but if you decide to watch the game via the text-based approach, you're not able to modulate the tactics. Whereas if you do it in the 3D match, you can, and so that's what we'll do. So this guy is a really kind of nice example of someone who you might well come across. And it's important before you get into the match, there's a couple of things that you need to do. You need to you might know what this looks like, but you want to just refresh what your strengths and weaknesses are. You can see that Shawnee has strong rally and service attributes. He's physically very good, mentally very good as well, although we've already talked about self-confidence being a problem. But many of his special attributes, the likes of lobbing, drop shots and counter shots, are not particularly great. So that's something to remember. And at the net, he is terrible. Now, if we look at Shapovalov from Canada, you can see he's kind of a different type of player. You can see here that his rally attributes are reasonably good, but actually he doesn't hit the ball all that hard. So that is kind of nice, but he is going to hit it pretty consistently. The issue he has with power extends all the way to his serve as well, where he's got a decent serve, but it's not going to be very hard to return. So it's not going to be very hard in terms of its power. At the net, he's pretty good, but he's probably more of a baseliner than a player that goes to the net. But his special attributes look really, really strong. So he's good if you go to the net. If you go to the net, he's going to cause some issues, and he's got a good drop shot on him. Physically, you also need to have a look what he's strong at and what he's not so strong at. So you can see there he's going to be fast around the court, but he is maybe lacking a little bit in reflexes and strength. he is tactically poor, tactically inept, and he has low focus and reasonably low concentration. So this is going to mean that if the game goes into for a long time, or if the point lasts for a long time, his mind may wander. So if you can last out in the point, it may be that those longer points will go your way. So these are all important things to remember, both for you, for your player, and also for the opposition player, in terms of how you're going to set your tactics up when you get into the match. Now, the one downside with this game, and there's not many downsides with this game. It's a game I really, really enjoy. Is that once you hit that 3D real-time match button, you can't see this screen again, which I think is a real shame. I've contacted, or Manor Games contacted me about this when I mentioned it previously, and I think in my kind of first ever review of the game, and they did say there was a way of doing it, but I think when I tried to do that, it just automatically meant that my the match was kind of forfeited and I lost the match. So it wasn't the ideal scenario, but it would be nice to be able to click on the player during the match and yourself during the match, just to remind you of their physical attributes, or even doing like a comparison as well. That would be kind of nice. So where is he stronger than you, and those sort of things. So let's go and click the real-time match, and we'll think about how to tactically approach different types of matches. So there's three things I think you want to consider when you are setting up your tactics. So your own strength and weaknesses, your opponent's strength and weaknesses, and also the environment that you're playing in. So let's approach those one at a time. So our own strengths and weaknesses, so we know we're pretty good at the baseline. We've got a strong serve, and in terms of our weakness, we're not particularly great at the net or with many of the sort of special approaches. So if the player goes to the net, we know we're going to struggle a little bit. So that is going to influence how you play, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. In terms of your opponent's weaknesses, you want to identify where they're not particularly strong. So many players might have a backhand or a forehand that is stronger or weaker than the other, and that is the sort of thing that you might want to target. Or potentially they've got a weak serve, so you could come in a little bit closer potentially if they've got a weak serve. Similarly, if they've got particular strengths, you need to adapt to those as well. So if they've got a lot of power, then you might want to stand a little bit further from the baseline, just to give yourself a little bit more time to deal with that. And finally, talking about the playing of the environment, the type of court you're going to play on may well dictate how you play. So we know that the slow courts, like the clay courts, rallies tend to be longer. You get very few aces on those sort of courts, whereas on the faster courts like this, like grass, you're going to get a lot more aces. The rallies are a lot shorter, so that may well influence how you want to play that. So, for example, in the clay courts, you might want to try and be a little bit more, or a little bit less aggressive, just to try and outlast your opponent and make him make a mistake. Whereas on the faster courts, perhaps you want to be a little bit more aggressive to try and win that point early and just put the opponent under pressure and get them making a mistake. So let's have a little look here over on the left side. So these are the ways we can alter the way things are played during the game. There are four options here. We have rally, first serve and second return, second serve and first return, and special. Now let's run through these and talk a little bit about some of these that are particularly important. One of the things that my player has is a very poor ability at the net. So one of the first things I do pretty much every time is to take this net wheel down, just to try and reduce the amount of time they go to the net. You may have someone who volleys quite effectively, and actually you want them to go to the net more. So you can influence it in that way. It's important to remember that that is not the only one of these buttons that influences their ability to go to the net. There are a couple of others in the serving section. So the serve and volley will, you might want to take that down if you've got a poor net player, and take that down in both the serve options. So we talked about whether a player has a good forehand or backhand, and what the way that you can modulate this is just by doing this. So a positive value will mean that you will aim more for their forehand. So if they've got a weak forehand, that's probably what you want to do, really focus on their weakness. One of the things I like to do early on in most games is go a little bit more attacking at the start and aim for the lines a little bit at the start, and that just hopefully sets us off to a reasonable start. It can backfire, and it has backfired a few times when the player's a little bit off and he just puts a few out. And I think if you notice that's happening quickly, then just pull it right back, and then you might want to think of differing approaches. On the bottom here, we've got using a forehand or a backhand, and that relates to the strength that you have on these things. So if you've got a strong forehand, well, why not, if there is the time allows it, encourage the player to run around and use that forehand a little bit more. So the baseline distance, again, is something I think is really, really useful to think about. So you can either go farther from the baseline, so further away, or close to the baseline. And I think that really relates to the power of the player that's coming against you. This is in terms of the rally. So if they've got strong, powerful forehands and backhands, or perhaps if you're playing, particularly if you're playing on fast courts like this, you want to move a bit further from the baseline and just give yourself a little bit more time to play. If you're playing on clay, or it's a weak player that you're playing against, maybe you want to go a bit closer and take the thing early to put them under pressure. The energy spending, I wouldn't worry about that too much. I think unless you're playing a weak player, I would constantly leave it at 100%. If you are playing someone who's quite weak and you're winning, early in a tournament, you're playing three best of 5 sets, and you've won the first 2 sets 6-love, 6-1. We'll take that energy spending down a little bit, just so you don't tire yourself out too much during the 3rd set, and just means that you'll be a little bit fresher. But I think it can have quite a negative effect on your play. So I wouldn't do that unless you're quite confident that you're going to win. In terms of the way you deal with serves, the ways these are set up is quite strange. This first one is your first serve and their second serve, how you deal with their second serve. So there's a few things that you might want to think about here. In terms of how you deal with their second serve, second serves are going to be a little bit weaker, so you might want to be a little bit more aggressive with that second serve. In terms of your return distance on your serve, this is a kind of a slightly strangely worded thing. So this relates to how far you stand from the baseline, and I constantly forget this myself, and I assume it means how deep you're actually hitting the ball, which would be a useful thing to know. But again, if you go positive like this, you can stand further away from the opponent's serve, or further away from the baseline on your opponent's serve, and you want to do that if the opponent has a very, very powerful serve. Otherwise, if they're quite weak, then come in and then pressure their serve a little bit. So you've got the option here of altering your serve speed, or you're aiming for the lines a bit. So this is all about modulating your serve, and what you want to do here, I think, is just keep an eye on your service percentage. If your service percentage is very high, you can start to become a little bit more aggressive with this, so you just try and pressure them a little bit more. But if you're getting very few first serves in, maybe you want to take the aim for the lines down a little bit and just try and get a few hard serves in, or you keep the aim for the lines where it is and just try and hit them a little bit harder to hit them a little bit softer to make sure you get the serves in the right place, increasing the chance of actually hitting the target. Serve spin's an interesting one, and I think that's definitely something that you can play around with during a game. If you're finding that a player is very effective at returning your serve, then you might want to increase the spin on your serve, and that can be quite effective. It can make no difference at all, and I would say the same about the in the special stats. You've got the option to play more slice backhands. I think this is a really effective way of just disrupting the opposition's play, and I think you often see when you put in a slice backhand, maybe the odd mistake from players who up until then have been doing some really good stuff. So the same applies for the next one. So this is second serve and for them, and first serve return. You want to go in a bit closer on their second serve, and you want to be a bit more aggressive. I think on your own second serve, I tend to leave those the same. Do you really want to be take more risks on that? I don't know. It's a big risk in itself, but perhaps if you're losing badly, you might want to do that to some degree. And then finally, these special attributes. You've got your ability to do drop shots and your lob will. And those are useful, obviously, if it's a baseliner you're playing against and you've got good drop shot ability. Well, put that up a little bit. Try and draw them into the net if they're crap at the net. That probably be a useful thing to do. Likewise, if they're a good net player, then use that lob and try and get them to the back of the court again. We've talked about the slice backhand, but one of the other things to think about is how you go about approaching passing the opposition. So I think the first thing you want to think about is training the passing training. So doing the passing shot training, and having that in your armory. That's something I haven't done a huge amount of, but I think that's really, really useful. And then you want to think about whether you want to pass them more cross court or down the line. Now, I play a lot of badminton, and I know one of the things that you don't tend to do is play cross court shots too often when the player's at the net, because all they've got to do is kind of reach out, and then the ball's kind of zooming away the other side of the court. So perhaps what the more sensible shot is a down the line cross shot, and if you've got that also with a player with decent positioning then and decent speed, then hopefully they'll be able to get on to the next shot. So I think we've gone through all of these things, and I've given you some examples of when to use them. I guess the last thing to talk about is the bits you've got down here, and this is so important. This is probably one of the most important things that I'm going to say in this video. We've got a couple of things that go on down here. We have the experience boost, and we talked about that. So if I click this, we have the option to boost experience by different percentages, or boost the performance by different percentages for the whole match, but some of those can be quite expensive on your experience points. So for a 14% boost, you have to pay 40%, that's a lot. Alternatively, you can just do it for 2 points at key times in the match. But the real key thing in all of these is the penalty box. We're not playing football. Basically, any change you make to these tactical approaches will increase the penalty associated with it. So anytime your penalty is above 0, then this is going to start to negatively affect your player. And I found recently that when you really start to mess around with it, it can have profoundly unwanted effects on your player. So there is a way around this, which I also found, and that is by bringing a coach with you. If you've got a coach with you at the tournament, then it means that you've got a lot more leeway in that sort of penalty with that penalty, so you are able to make many more changes. So I guess it's just kind of suggesting that if you're on your own, you can't really very effectively make lots of tactical changes, but when you've got the coach to kind of tell you what you need to do, it's a much easier thing to do, and it often tends to be more likely to be the right thing. So that is a whistle-stop tour to dealing with the tactical approach to games. I hope it was useful. Most of this is from my own experience rather than anything else, and if you've found things that work particularly well for you under certain conditions, please drop them below. I'd be really interested to hear what your thoughts are on sort of certain tactical approaches. If you think some of the things I said were wrong, then I'd also like to hear that, because again, this is all kind of trial and error, or based on kind of logic, which isn't always the best way to go. So yeah, leave some comments down below. Yeah, let me know if you found this useful, and also if there are other types of these sort of more instructional videos with this game that you would like to see beyond the training that I've already done and this sort of approach. What other things would you like to see? I think one of the things I was maybe thinking of doing was something around scheduling, but let me know what your thoughts are on that. Anyway, folks, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's quite an in-depth one, but I hope it was useful. Please like the video if you did enjoy it. Please subscribe to the channel for lots more Tennis Manager content. Every weekend we have heaps of Tennis Manager content on the channel, so stick around for that, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.